Guys, we're gonna get started right now. Um, First of all, I am so happy, so grateful that all of you decided to come. I love to see repeating faces. As a reminder, you have a chance of winning this plushie for signing in, so we'll do a raffle, and one of you could take this home today. Not you, Nicole. You can win it all. Yeah, so thank you for signing in. And as a reminder, I always want to remind you guys, I don't want you guys to try to memorize anything I present today. I want you guys to see, if you do memorize something, it's more of like, oh, this clarifies something in my life, or it's insightful. Just how could it apply to your own life? That's how I want you guys to take this information in today. And so, yeah, today we'll be talking about psychedelics and depression. We kind of already touched on it, but I want to get your ideas on like psychedelics and depression. What comes to mind when you think of these two topics?
Therapy.
Therapy, psychedelics, and like, yeah,
Therapy.
therapy, straight up.
I think of the quarantine.
Quarantine, I was actually doing research on this.
It's because
No, definitely,
there was a
definitely.
time.
It was definitely a time. And it was definitely a time. And while doing research, the numbers are unclear because the last time they collected like data on like the population was 2021, but they're predicting like the depression rates since then has been enormous. So when the data comes out on like the new rates of depression, that's gonna be interesting. We're gonna touch on like what is the global percentage of people have depression, and in the globally and the United States to like see. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? No? Okay. All right. So friend of mine, we're gonna first define depression. What is depression? And then we'll look at the current treatments of like how are we dealing with people who have depression, and then we'll look into the literature behind psychedelics and depression. So to start off, what is depression? Any, thoughts? Go ahead, Hiroshi.
It's the chemical. Oh, it's the response to your outlook of life in a very unfortunate series of ways.
Unfortunate series of ways.
Yeah, like the way you're looking at everything is kind of unfortunate and sluggish because it's like the power.
Oh, so it's a sense of like power, like I can't do anything, all this is happening to me and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, that there is some truth to that. When you don't feel like you could do anything, it's called hopelessness, right? Learned hopelessness.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other like what is depression?
It's when like things that used to excite you no longer excite you anymore.
Definitely, that is a part of what depression is. So you're both right in a way. And this is just me. I looked at 4 sources, and all the sources are gonna be in a PDF. If you guys want to check it out, fact check me. But this is what I came up with. Persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest, like you said, Sophie, affects how you feel, think, act, and perceive the world, which ultimately affects how you perform your day-to-day task. And importantly, it lasts for more than 2 weeks. Some people have like days. Like I definitely have days like this, or like 2, 3 days, then I bounce back. But it's not consistent. So yeah. So the importance, I did kind of touch on this, but around 266 million people globally are have depression right now, which is kind of crazy. That's a lot of people. Yeah, we're 7 billion people in the world, but 266 million people have depression. The United States, that's around 5.7%. So we're bigger than the global average. Yeah, and then what's crazy is that people who have depression, clinically diagnosed depression, if you give them treatment, the treatment that we have right now, 50% of them will relapse. They'll feel better for a bit and then they'll come back. So like they tried and then they're like, damn, like that's 1/2 of people who the treatment isn't effective. Imagine like taking an ibuprofen and there's a 50% chance that like you don't feel better. That's kind of crazy. And then 30% of those people who have depression are treatment resistant. So no matter what you do, the depression keeps persisting. Go ahead.
This is only diagnosed depression.
Yes. So this is the people who, they went to yeah, something like that.
No.
Yeah. So we're gonna go into the symptoms. They could be emotional, behavioral, physically, cognitive. What are some symptoms you guys would guess? And a lot of the symptoms, like while I was looking it up, I'm like, yo, that's me. Like, but I don't, I don't think I have depression, but
I'd say isolation from other people. It's a big-
so isolating yourself, like, that's like more of a behavioral thing?
Yeah.
Purpose, okay. Chuck?
Like tiredness. Like
Yes.
sense of like sleep deprived, even though you get like 12 hours of sleep, you still want to lay in the bed and do studies on.
Right. You feel tired, drowsy, yeah, 100% that is one of the symptoms.
alienation from the world itself. So,
When you say alienation of yourself, what do you mean by that?
meaning that you feel like you're constantly fighting against yourself. Start thinking of yourself as a roadblock, like literally. Oh, why can't I get out of bed? Why can't I do work? Why do I feel like absolute garbage?
Yeah, affects the way you think. Yes. That's an interesting way to put it. So we'll go over them. The emotional ones, you guys can read it, but persistent sadness or low mood, feelings of guilt or worthlessness, hopelessness, irritability or frustration. That is the emotional symptoms. There's cognitive symptoms, difficulty concentrating, so she can't do work, loss of interest, pleasure, negative thinking, like you mentioned, and thoughts of death or suicide. Physical symptoms, changes in appetite or weight, sleep disturbances, fatigue or low energy, like you mentioned, Sean, psychomotor agitation or retardation, and aches and pains. That is definitely something I feel like. I always have some physical pain, but I don't know why. I don't think I have depression though. Who knows? Behavioral symptoms, social withdrawal, like you guys mentioned, decreased productivity, you guys also mentioned, and neglecting personal care. So they all kind of intersect, they're all kind of related, but they all have different things. So we're now going to go and touch on the current treatments on depression. So we're going to start off with psychotherapy. Yeah, what's interesting about psychotherapy, there's a bunch of methods of therapy, and what they found is around 50, I think it's 50 or 60% of people who go through therapy find that they feel better, they have better lessening of their symptoms, and they feel better from depression. Which is, that's our best thing right now. And then there's medication, which is not as successful, depending the type of medication you get. It's anywhere from 27 to 45% success. So they give you a pill, and then maybe you feel better. So that's interesting. And if you mix the two, psychotherapy and medication, it goes up to 65%, which is, it's honestly, that's our best one right now. And then there's lifestyle changes, which, like physical, diet, sleep hygiene, mindful. It's the whole thing we talked about last week, integration, not last week, 2 weeks ago. Those are things you could do to improve your life. And then there's alternate therapies. These ones are very interesting. There's a lot of research going into electrotherapy and whole body therapy. Well, not really whole body, but mostly electrotherapy. Essentially, they get electricity and they shock your brain because they think we're machines. We might be, who knows? We might be robots, but I don't like to think that. And what's interesting, it's something that's been around for a while, ECT, since I think the 80s, 60s. But the problem with that, even though it's a high success rate of around 80% who find that their depression gets alleviated, you get memory loss, you get seizures while getting your brain shocked. So that's not ideal. And they only do it for like last resort. You went through everything and you still feel depressed, they give you electrotherapy. However, recently in Stanford, they developed a new method where now you don't get seizures, and it's more strategic. And yeah, that's very promising, what they're doing in Stanford. And there's the whole body hypothermia, where basically they raise your body to a mild fever, and you're like in this tank where you're basically in a sauna, and you're there for like an hour. And one session also seems to improve your depression, alleviate your depression, but there isn't much research on it. Electrotherapy has more research. So now that we went over the current treatments, some of them are effective, but they're not getting the job done. And this is where psychedelics come into the picture. But before we jump into psychedelics, I want to ask you guys, let's actually go back. For the current treatments, would you say these are good enough, or like these are solid for what we have right now?
No.
No? No? Okay,
Three.
I would say, yeah, I would say 3 is good and 1 is good.
you don't think the medication is good? No?
It
Wait.
causes more addictions.
Causes more addictions? Interesting. But isn't like psychedelics sort of like that we're giving someone medication?
Well, I don't know the research on addiction, but I don't think psychedelics cause addiction.
Right, it's not to the same degree. I'm not too sure. I'm not like an expert on SSRIs, but I'm not sure if they make you addicted. It's not like opioids.
Well,
I have a friend who takes SSRIs because she's depressed. And the thing with SSRIs is after a while of use, like they don't really have that much of effect.
Right,
But you
right.
still get dependent on it. So then if you stop taking it, you get negative effects.
That's all right.
If there's like a huge dependence, so this is why that's why you can't stop cold turkey or super. It's super.
Right, it's because they like, you're getting artificial serotonin.
But wouldn't that always be the case for any medication in that case?
No.
I mean, yeah, for pain, it's the same.
Yeah, for opioids,
Yeah.
But not even just for opioids, but even ibuprofen, you can get dependent on ibuprofen, couldn't you?
I mean, you could, yeah.
Yeah, technically.
So you can get dependent on any medication.
Any medications are big.
I have a stretch, but a lot of
Maybe
them.
stretch, maybe one.
With SSRIs, it's also hard because like with depression, they don't fully
Like
understand
antibiotics.
what causes it.
Yeah.
The SSRIs are just kind of guess.
If I start taking.
Right, that's a good point.
I just
Vitamin
not
C
said.
is-
Maybe, I don't know, who knows? Maybe you might be on.
No, but, okay, these are just for psychoactive.
But no, but here's my thing, you move vitamin C, right? If I stop going out to the sun, I start taking vitamin C, doesn't that create a dependency in my body for vitamin C?
You're thinking about it.
Ah, same shit.
Is it called?
But
Also, when I have a second addiction, that can also cause more chronic diseases outside of it.
Chronic diseases with like,
Like they can cause other problems in the body,
got you. Okay, yeah, everything has a risk to reward.
like liver.
Liver damage, yeah. Okay.
we consider 70 passing in the United States, right?
70?
Yeah, we consider 70% passing, right? But none of these have above the 70%.
Well, electrotherapy does, but there's a lot of side effects. Honestly, electrotherapy in the coming years, from what I understand, might be the new way they treat depression. They recently got FDA approved, but it's so dumb because they had a sample size of like 10 or 20 people that like they found that they had a 80% remission rate where like people were able to feel better from depression. But they weren't getting seizures, and the reason they approved this because ECT has been around for so long, and this form a new way of shocking the brain doesn't. And it's like a crisis. So many people have depression, and I think it's done because we had the same evidence for like I think it was, what was it, MDMA with MAPS. They had a treatment and it didn't get FDA approved. They got shut down, and it had way more people than 20. So that's something to think about. Right. It's just like psychedelics they're I guess a scary thing. All right, so now we're gonna talk about the current. So just I didn't mention that psychedelics are currently like a scary thing, but one thing is ketamine is a Schedule 3 drug, so the government considers there's some medical use. So there is a FDA approved that in all 50 states, if your doctor could prescribe you Spravato, which is known as ketamine, which is basically a more potent part of ketamine, more potent ketamine.
Which
I've
is
been
not-
used
it's
this
like-
It's a disassociated.
It's associated, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's a whole argument, like MDMA is not a psychedelic, but it also considered it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
There are different types of drugs with psychedelic properties.
Right. The reason they kind of consider psychedelics, we touched on it in the first meeting, is they all interact with the 5-HT2A receptors, same receptors serotonin interacts with, so that's why they all consider them psychedelics. So esketamine or Spravato has a 55% remission rate, which is pretty good. And what's most important is that it's fast acting. All the treatments I just mentioned take weeks, 5-6 sessions before you see improvements. And then we're gonna look at a meta-analysis. Oh, well, let me take a step back. There's a new ketamine derivative that they're developing. It's probably gonna come out soon. Get FDA approved perhaps. Is ketamine, which is a different part of the ketamine molecule that seems to have less side effects than Spravato. So yeah, your doctor could prescribe that, which is very interesting. And then there's a meta-analysis of 14 psychedelic assisted therapies. Basically, they give you the psychedelic and they mixed it with therapy. And what they found is people have alleviated feelings of depression for up to 3 to 5 weeks, and the data is a little spotty after that. And then meta-analysis on just giving people psilocybin for depression, and they found 7 of the 9 studies that just giving people psychedelic psilocybin helped them with their depression. Yeah, none of these are long-term, and there's a lot of research that needs to be done, but as you can see, the data is kind of, it's a small pool, but there is research being done. And yeah, there is ketamine that is sort of a psychedelic, not a psychedelic. But all that said, there's a reason why people think psychedelics there's so much potential on psychedelics, and it's because of the clinical learning period. Sophie, she did a wonderful breakdown of the study. We kind of collabed on it, and basically, psychedelics seem to have the potential to prime us to better receive therapy to treat depression, and that goes beyond depression. People say, "Oh, it helps me quit smoking. It helps me quit other things. Makes me alleviate my anxiety," and it's because it makes your brain more adaptable in the future.
Neuroplasticity.
Yes, makes your brain more plastic, and so you're able to receive therapy more effectively. And the reason we know this is because they did a study on rats, and this is actually what our journal club was supposed to be for last week, but it got canceled. We're moving it to next week, Thursday, before the talk. But I highly encourage you guys to, like, if you guys want, you could look at it right now and scan it. And just, it's a quick read. And essentially, what they found is they put here's the study design. They got rats, adult rats, and they taught them to associate 2 spaces, one with isolation, like being more to themselves, and one that was associated with being social. And once they got that, the rats to understand that, they then give them 2 treatments, either the psychedelic treatments or the control treatment, which is a non-psychedelic. And what they found is that after giving the rats psychedelic treatments, they all preferred the social setting. And you're like, why does that matter? How does that prove that it opened the wow, I misspelled that, the critical learning period? Because in previous research, they found that when kids, or not kids, but like people, the critical learning period is heavily associated with being more social, because when you're in that period of like you're learning more plastic, more adaptable, you just get more reward, more serotonin, more dopamine for the activities you do. And so they're like inferring that since these rats became, even as adults, were getting more rewarded for being a social, they were getting that kid-like joy that people often associate with psychedelics. Oh, I feel like I was a kid again. If that's something, I don't know if you guys have heard of that before. Go ahead.
Something to do with the rats.
No, so they gave them they gave them saline as the control, but then they gave them what was it? They gave it psilocybin, MDMA.
Psilocybin, MDMA, ketamine, and I think there was one more. It was ibogaine.
Ibogaine.
Yeah.
And so they gave them multiple, and they all found the same thing, that like these rats became more social after getting the psychedelic treatments. And this is like, it's super exciting to me, because like what that sort of proves, like we're just taking a guess, but essentially a person's positive feedback loop gets turned back on. You get that kid-like wonder after psychedelics, and there's this period where you could start receiving treatment, like, oh, like you mentioned, oh, it's so hard to do anything, right? Like, oh, I can't do my work, I can't go to work, it's just so hard, I prefer to stay in bed. After you take a psychedelic, there's like this 2-week period window or a month, depending on the psychedelic you take, where those things all suddenly became easier. Still got to put in the work, but they're not as hard as before, because now you're getting more reward, getting more serotonin, more dopamine for doing the same things that were previously hard. So that's why they think there's a lot of potential in psychedelics. So yeah, I think that's really cool.